Hey there nation, welcome to the show where we help you to play miniatures wargaming on a budget. It is I, Commander Cheapskate, and welcome to another episode of Cheap Shots where we show you guys how to save money on the miniatures wargaming hobby. And on episode number 52, we'll be showing you guys how to quickly as well as cheaply paint up some Necromunda Van Saar gangers. As you can see, this would be the end result of your guys' gang. Doing our quick Cheapskate method, it's going to cost you a grand total of $40.73 to paint up your entire gang to look like this, and this is assuming of course that you're purchasing everything for the very first time. And when you compare that with the cost would cost you to buy all your materials from Citadel Army Painter, we're talking about a grand total savings of $128.57 as well. As you can see in the background, we also got a little bonus vehicle there. This Van Saar gang is being painted up in a synthwave inspired design is what we're doing for this one. And the reason why there's a vehicle in the background is because this Van Saar gang will be participating in our Anarchy Road vehicle based Necromunda campaign. It's a campaign that's set up in the Ash Waste as well. So one of my buddies wanted in on the campaign. He wanted his Van Saar paint up in a synthwave style, and this is exactly what it's going to look like. As you can see, you got a really good tabletop result. At the same time, we're going to save over $128.57 in the process of doing so. So that being said, let's get this video on a roll. So the very first thing you need to do with your miniatures, of course, is prime them. As you can see in this photo here, I have pretty much the entirety of the Van Saar gang laid out with the vehicle, as well as their energy shields that they have there on the bottom there as well. First thing you do, of course, is base spray all your miniatures. In this case, we're going to use primer. We're going to use the cheapest black primer we could find, which is made by Rust-Oleum Flat Black Primer. It's the cheapest primer I could find. I get it at my local Walmart for $3.99 as well. Just do the once over real quick for all the miniatures, so that we have a good solid base coat to work off of. Now, the reason why you want to do a primer your miniatures is for a couple reasons. One, it's going to give it a nice texture for your paint to stick on, so that way it doesn't come rubbing off your miniature and ruining your finish. At the same time, by spray painting it black, you kind of create a darkened kind of undertone for the miniature, which means that your colors will be more dark and recessed as well, which isn't really going to be a problem in this one because we're going to primarily use spray paint in order to paint up this gang, and I'll show you that exactly what it looks like here in a second. So once you get your priming done, now it's time for you guys to do some base spraying with some spray paint. Alright, so we're going to base spray our miniatures now. This is a photo that's taking place in my garage, and the reason why is because these Van Saar gangers are painted very, very quickly. To do the whole synthwave look for these miniatures, I'm using a lot of Zenithal Highlighting is what I'm doing for this one. Now, in case you're not sure what Zenithal Highlighting is, it's basically you spray your miniatures either with an airbrush or, in this case, cheap spray paint. You spray them at an upward angle for spraying downwards onto your miniatures. So that way it gives the idea that these guys are glowing and that they have a lot of reflective light reflecting off of them. It's typically used for things like if you want to have a light source on your miniatures, like they're walking through the city streets, or if they have a light source next to them, like a lantern or a ball of energy or something like that, it does this really cool effect on them. Well, my buddy wanted these guys to be painted up like a synthwave type of look with them, and in synthwave there's a lot of dark shadows as well as bright neon colors on them, and so that's exactly what we decided to do with this one. So in this case, I gave the entire gang a quick once over with Satin Hunter Green. It's made by Krylon Paint and runs you about $3.99 at your local Walmart as well. Not $3.99, $4.99. And so all I did is real quick, base coat real fast, spray the entirety of the miniatures, give them the once over with this Hunter Green. Now, usually when you spray paint your miniatures like this, there are nooks and crannies on your miniatures that the paint doesn't hit all the way, and that's not going to be a problem at all. Like I said, we're going to do a lot of Zenithal highlighting on these miniatures, so if there's any colors that spilled over or doesn't get captured with the spray paint, it doesn't matter, just because it's going to look like it's part of the shadow anyways, so that part we don't really worry about. And plus, since we base sprayed these miniatures in black anyways, it'll just look like shadows, so it all works out in the end. Alright, so the next step is to do our very first Zenithal highlight in this one. So in the end result for my for this Van Saar gang, I plan on using a lot of pinks and magentas to make it look like there's pink or a magenta neon light kind of glowing on them. And when I'm going to do my Zenithal highlight, I'm going to have that pink color come from the upper right hand corner of the miniatures shining down upon them. So because of that, I need to create a shadow color in the bottom left hand side of the miniature. Not bottom left hand side, top left hand side of the miniature. So to do that, what I'm using is a color called Deep Teal. It's made by Rust-Oleum. It costs you $3.99 at your local Hobby Lobby. All I did is I just kind of took that can of spray paint and I sprayed from upward angle, spraying down from the top left hand corner of the miniatures. This deep teal color kind of gives this off kind of greenish blue kind of glow going on the left hand shoulder of these miniatures, the left hand side, our left hand side looking at the miniatures, to give this kind of like green glowing effect on the top left hand side of each of the miniatures, as you can see there. So just do a really quick once over real quick, spray at about a 45-degree angle, and you're ready to move on for your next Zenithal highlight. Alright, so once again we're doing another Zenithal Highlight, this time exactly the same angle as before with our deep teal color. We're using Silver Lilac by Rust-Oleum. It's a kind of like a nice pale purplish color, and I just did a real quick light spray from the top left hand corner at a 45-degree angle, spraying downwards, so that way you have like kind of like this glowing kind of I guess you would say like purplish highlight taking place on the left hand side of the body. And the reason why is because when I combine it with the magenta spray that I'm going to do here next on the top right hand corner, it's going to create this kind of shadowy kind of highlighting effect going on with the different pinks and colors and stuff like that. So it's going to look really, really cool in that part as well. At the same time, that darker green color as well as the teal will stay in the shadowy recesses of the miniatures as well, kind of giving this kind of like glowing shadowy effect on the miniatures. Looks really, really cool. Alright, so the very last step we're going to do is my final Zenithal Highlight, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to spray from the top right hand corner downward at a 45-degree angle, and I'm using Rust-Oleum Magenta. It costs you $3.99 at your local Walmart, as you can see there. And now you can kind of see what I'm talking about, this whole Zenithal highlighting thing as well. As you can see, it looks really, really cool. You kind of like this neon purple, kind of neon pink glow going on. At the same time, we have the darker teal as well as the green in the recesses, make it look like these guys look kind of shadowy, but at the same time they're being hit and struck at a certain angle by the light source, which is this neon kind of look to them. Very, very synthwave. Now the picture doesn't do very much justice here in my garage just because I don't have really good lighting in my garage, but when I show you the next slide, I'm going to show you exactly what the miniatures look like after you do all this base spraying with spray paint. And here you go, ladies and gentlemen. This is what they look like when you get done spray painting with the base spraying with the Zenithal highlighting on them. And as you can see, they look really, really cool. They look like they got like this purplish green color going on with this like neon light source hitting them. And if you really, really wanted to, technically speaking, you could just stop right here if you wanted to with your gang. This is a very, very quick method to paint up your miniatures if you wanted to. You could actually say, this is what my gang looks like, because as you can see by itself, it just looks really, really cool. It looks like this monochromatic, like they're walking through the dim-lighted streets of Necromunda. At the same time, you got like neon lights hitting from very much away, and it looks kind of cool that way. If you wanted to, you could just say that you're done and you can move on. Very, very quick way of painting up your miniatures if you wanted to do that. I did exactly the same thing I talked about earlier with all the spraying with the spray paint. I did exactly the same thing with my vehicle as well that I'm using, that my friend's going to be using for his gang on this one. So that's how you could do if you want to. Now for me and for my friend, of course, this wasn't really good enough for us. We wanted to take it to another level, and so we're going to start adding some more colors to these guys to make it a little bit more vibrant, has a little bit of stick out a little bit, have this kind of cool green glowing effect on their armor and stuff. And we're going to talk about that next. Now, before we go any further, real quick, the first thing you want to do, of course, is take care of their energy shields really, really fast. That's the first thing you guys are going to want to do with this one. So this is what ended up happening. First thing I recommend you do is I recommend that you base coat your shields as well as oil wash your shields first, so that way they get time to dry. And once they're dry, then you can move on to the rest of the miniatures real quick. So you can see here what I did for the energy shields. For the actual energy shield itself, I put 2 thin coats of pale gray on there, just because I plan on doing some glazing with those energy shields to make it look like they're glowing. But at the same time though, they got some metal bits on there. As you can see there, we got the actual shield base itself where the energy kind of comes off of. In that case, I did a base coat real quick with 2 thin coats of Anniversary Silver by Folk Art. Runs you 75 cents to local Hobby Lobby. And I also did some pure gold as well by Folk Art as well for the little spidery skull icon in the middle of each of the shields. Did 2 thin coats of those real quick. Now the reason why I want to take care of this step first is because that way when they get done with the oil wash, your rest of your miniatures will be done too, and then you can, you know, put them all together and assemble them, and it'd be one less process for you to worry about. And like I said before, once you get done base coating, the next thing you do, of course, is quick oil wash on the metal parts that you just did on the energy shields. I like to use Midwax Poly Shades Mission Oak color. It does exactly the same thing as Army Painter Strong Tone. The difference, though, is that the Midwax Poly Shade only costs you $7 a can, while the Army Painter costs you $32. And I just did a real quick oil wash for all the metal parts on those energy shields. Now, the Poly Shade will leak onto the white undercoat of the energy shields that you just got done base coating. That's not such a big deal, because all you need to do is once it dries and cures, just touch up the areas where the oil wash got onto with just some more pale gray, and just, you know, put 2 more coats on there, and there's no harm, no foul at that point. Alright, so the next thing we need to do now is go back to our miniatures. As you can see here, we have this nice, beautiful synthwave look going on with these guys. But like I said before, we want to add some more detail to these guys. We're mainly picking out a lot of the details that are done in metallics in this case. So you can see in this photo, I've basically converted these guys. My friend wanted these guys to look like T800 modeled Van Saar. He was kind of like, he's been playing a lot of Cyberpunk 2077, and he was inspired by the synthwave neon 80s look of that game. And when he bought his miniatures for his Van Saar gang, he wanted them to look kind of like that, but at the same time he wanted them to look like kind of like Terminators. So we did a quick conversion on these guys, replaced their heads with skulls. to make them look like T-800s. So all I need to do is just pick out the heads, the helmets, as well as the gun barrels real quick, as well as the weapon blades. Pick those out in 2 thin coats of Anniversary Silver by Folk Art, runs you 75 cents at your local Hobby Lobby. So that way you can kind of create this kind of cool glowing effect with the weaponry. Like at the same time, it gives draws the eye to the attention to the skulls, as well as the barrels of the weapons real quick. And this Van Saar gang is actually very kitted out for close combat, so there's a lot of pistols in this gang, which is actually kind of neat. Alright, so the next thing we need to do now is work on the ammo crate. For 2 of these Van Saar miniatures, 2 of the figures have their foot standing on top of a crate full of grenades. So what we decided to do is to paint out that ammo can in 2 thin layers of English Ivy Green. It's made by Apple Barrel Paint. It runs you about 50 cents at your local Walmart. Just put 2 thin layers on the of the crate that these guys are standing on, and you're pretty much ready to go. You don't need to be particularly neat at this part. Just make sure that your paint doesn't go over to the space spray that you did before, and you're going to be pretty much okay. Alright, so for the next step, what we're going to do now is pick out some of the details on these miniatures. In this case, we're going to use lime sherbet, 2 thin base coats of lime sherbet on these guys. So my friend wanted these guys to have like glowing eyes, so what we basically did is put a thin little dot of lime sherbet on each of the eye sockets of the silver skulls for each one of these Van Saar gang members. That way it looks like the eyes are glowing. At the same time, these Van Saars wear these hazmat suits. They have these suits that they wear in order to, it's kind of like a type of life support system. And on these suits, they got a lot of tubes that run over the suit, so from like the back to their shoulders to their chest. They also have some that runs along the rib cage. So what we basically did is put those 2 thin coats of lime sherbet on those details. And the nice thing about it is that lime sherbet, which is a bright green, looks like it has like this glowing effect when you put it against the purple and the spray paint that we did earlier. So it looks like it's got like this neon green glowing effect going on, which is kind of cool as well. We also put some lime sherbet on some of the finer details like the diodes as well as the dials on these guys. A lot of these guys have like these bio monitors or these little screens on them for attachments. You can put a little dot of lime sherbet on that, make it look like it's glowing. Same thing with some of the weapons, like for example the rad cannon in the background there. It's got some energy cells there that we picked out in green. Same thing with the what you call that, the flamer pistol that the leader is carrying as well. So just put 2 thin coats of lime sherbet and you're ready to move on. Alright, the next thing you do real quick is just do a quick dry brush on the ammo can that these 2 miniatures are standing on. I use Palm Relief by Apple Barrel Paint. Runs you 50 cents to local Walmart. Just do a quick dry brush real quick on the ammo can and then you're ready to move on. Alright, the last thing we're going to do now is work on the metallics on these miniatures. So first of all, going back to those grenade cases that these guys are standing on. Inside they got like these little grenades that are locating each of the ammo crates that they're standing on. I just picked those out in 2 thin layers of copper by Folk Art. Runs you about 75 cents at your local Hobby Lobby. Just put 2 thin coats on those grenades and you're ready to move on for your next detail. So the last detail we're going to pick out on these miniatures real quick is the gold. So for example, we wanted to add some color variety to these guys. We don't want to make them look too monochromatic with the purples and the greens and magentas. So what we decided to do is pick out some gold accents as well. So for example, we decided to concentrate on the elbow as well as the knee pads for these biosuits these guys are wearing, as well as some little minor details like some buttons, some dials, some weapon barrels in some cases. So any details that we wanted picked out in gold, we just put 2 thin layers of pure gold by Folk Art. Runs you 75 cents your local Hobby Lobby. Put 2 thin coats on that and you're ready to move on with your guys' rest of your details. So the next step we need to do, of course, is an oil wash. This is a quick paint method, which means that we're going to basically shade all of it at once. Like I said before, we're going to use mid-wax poly shades, and Mission Oak Color does exactly the same thing as Army Painter Strong Tone. Like I said before, the major difference though is the cost. Mid-wax poly shades cost you $7, while the Army Painter costs you $32. As you can see that this oil wash does a couple things. First of all, it helps to kind of blend the different base sprays that we did for our Zenithal Highlightings on our miniatures as well. At the same time, also kind of mutes down a little bit that glowing green color, and also the oil wash goes into the recesses and brings out a lot of the details that you couldn't see before. So as you can see there, it's got that nice kind of purple glowing green effect going on with these guys as well. At the same time, you can see a lot of the details. And I did exactly the same thing with their vehicle there in the background. I painted up their vehicle real quick and just did a quick oil wash. In case you're wondering, that little vehicle there was a toy that I picked up at my local dollar store. It's about the same size and scale as an orc truck, so you know, and it costs like $1, and that's like the perfect combination of things. So we purchased that for this gang as well, so it looks really, really cool. Once again, once you get this oil wash done, you want to wait this stuff to let it dry for 24 hours, and the reason why is because there is polyurethane in this. It will dry and seal your miniature as well as cure it. So because of that, you want to leave it alone for 24 hours, and the reason why is because if you mess with it while it's sticky, you could ruin the finish, so you don't want to do that. So my suggestion to you is whenever you paint, just towards the end of your paint session, wash the miniatures in poly shades, wait 24 hours, return back to them, and continue on. And while this stuff is drying, we're going to go back to the energy shields that we talked about earlier. Alright, so here's the energy shields that we were talking about earlier. These were the ones that we started with earlier and did some oil wash in the previous day. This stuff is dried and cured, and what we're going to do is we're going to make these energy shields look like they're glowing. And to do that, we're going to do a technique which is known as glazing. All you do when you do with glazing is you have a good solid white or bright gray undercoat. What you do is you take whatever paint color that you want this stuff to glow as, and what you do is you take your paint and you thin it down with water till it's about the consistency of milk, and then you just kind of apply it like a wash over the entirety of the energy shield. So in this case, because these miniatures have a synthwave kind of inspired paint job, I want to make a look at these energy shields where the energy source that causes bright pink glow that's on the Van Saar guys. So I wanted the kind of like this neon pink kind of glow. So that's what I did. I just applied layer upon layer of glaze onto the energy shields on the parts that were painted white. So I just watered down the Deco Art Americana Deco Arts magenta color. Runs about 65 cents at your local Hobby Lobby, and just applied the wash like it would normally. You would have to wait this stuff to dry and then apply another layer. In this case, I put 4 layers of Deco Arts magenta wash on this to give it kind of like that cool little glowing effect. It is going to take a while. It is kind of tedious in the sense that you have to wait for this stuff to dry, but believe me, once you build these layers, it's kind of worth it. And once you're done with doing that glaze, next thing you do is a dry brush. Alright, so in this case, I did a dry brush real quick with Cameo Pink by Apple Barrel Paint. Runs at 50 cents at your local Walmart. I just did a quick once over the dry brushing on the energy shield. And the reason why you did that is because the energy shields have like these tendrils that kind of branch out from the main grip of the shield. And that's where I think that creates the energy field from. And so I want to pick out that detail real quick. So I just did a quick little dry brush of Cameo Pink. And once again, we're going to go back and glaze it one more time. Alright, so now we're done with the dry brushing. All I did again is once again glaze, create another glaze again with my Americana magenta color Deco Art. And once again, I just watered it down to the consistency of milk, washed these miniatures over, and repeated that process again. Now, the last time I did that, I put 4 layers on the initial glazing on these energy shields, and then I dry brushed them with that Cameo Pink. This time, I only put 2 layers of the magenta glaze on top of it, so that way you got this really neat kind of glowing effect. You can see how the dry brushing and the glazing is interacting. You got like this kind of glowing, kind of reverberating kind of effect going on these things. They look really cool. And once you're done with that, you can move on back to your miniatures and start working on the base work. Alright, so here is our miniatures, once again, our little Van Saar gang, and now we're going to start working on the bases. So we're going to do a lot more work on the bases than we usually do when it comes to our Necromunda miniatures. In this case, I use Anniversary Silver, once again by Folk Art. Just put 2 thin layers on the entirety of the base of the miniature, and let that sit and dry. And the reason why we're doing that is because we're going to make it look like the ground plating that these guys are standing on have like glowing neon effect coming from the bases, and so that's the kind of base we're going to work on these guys. Alright, so once you get your silver done, the next thing we're going to do now is apply a thin layer of pale gray on all the vents. As you can see there, we got lots of vents and crevices built within these things. And what we're going to do is we're going to apply some bright colored paints to the white to give it kind of like this glowing neon effect going on. Like there's these chemicals down below that's kind of creating this glow in the dark effect. So we're using pale gray in order to do that. You don't need to be particularly neat at this point. Just kind of put a little dot of some pale gray on the parts that you want to be lit up. And the reason why is because it's going to add to that glowing effect. And it's just going to make it look like it's more vibrant. So the very first thing, of course, we do is do a base coat with our neon glowing effect. This time I use Candy Pink by Apple Barrel Paint. I just put 2 thin layers of this stuff on all the vents and things. Like I said before, if it spills over, it's perfectly fine. And the reason why is because we're kind of going for like this glowing chemical effect that's going on the bases real fast. So just put out 2 thin layers of Candy Pink and you're ready to move on. And the last thing we're going to do real quick is do another Leon Glow here. We're going to use Tahiti Blue by Delta Sarum Coat. Runs about 65 cents at your local Hobby Lobby as well. So all the parts that you want to have like this neon blue kind of color going through, you just kind of add that real fast and just apply this Tahitian Blue. Now I will need to warn you guys, you'll need to wash the bases once you guys get done doing this whole neon glow paint. The problem though is I forgot to take a photo of the oil wash that I use, but that's okay though. I'm going to show you guys what that looks like here in the next slide. So I do apologize for that. Alright, so here's the next picture for the bases. Now what I forgot to do is I forgot to take a picture of me putting an oil wash on the bases. I use exactly the same thing before, mid-wax poly shade acrylic on this one. The difference though is I really thinned out that mid-wax poly shade with paint thinner, and the reason why I did that is because I wanted to make sure that the neon glow wasn't too muted too badly on the bases. So that's what I did. I washed the entire base and that stuff, waited for 24 hours, let it dry, and then of course you moved on from there. Real quick after that, I just of course did a really quick spray with some varnish spray, and then I rimmed the bases with Skyline by Folk Art. It's a nice kind of grayish blue color that I use for all the miniatures that we use for our campaigns. They all have that same kind of rim on the bases to make it look like a really urban kind of wasteland type of look. And then once you're done with that, you're pretty much done with the miniature. So once you get done with the base work, you just get a quick little base spray real quick with some matte varnish real quick, and then take the energy shields that we were working on earlier and glue them onto the miniature. And as you can see here, we got this really cool end result that we showed you guys at the beginning. So you can see the vehicle in the background is painted exactly the same way as the gang. We got this really cool kind of neon synthwave inspired gang. At the same time, saved you a bunch of money at doing so at the same time. So like I said before, we're going to go through the shopping list now and show you exactly how much it would cost if you want to paint these miniatures up using Citadel and Army painters painting products, and talk about exactly what the cost savings would end up being. Alright, so let's go on and talk about the Citadel and Army painter method. So if you're to paint up the same way that we do these miniatures with exactly the same kind of products, but with Army painter and Citadel materials, let's go on and talk about what you'll need to do that. So first of all, you need to spray our miniatures down with Chaos Black Spray. Runs to $17 at your local Games Workshop store, so you need to buy a can of that stuff. And then what you need to do is use Air Color by Citadel as well. If you have an airbrush, you could use this. If you don't have an airbrush, you could just paint these on. But anyways, these are the colors you would need. First of all, you need to do that base spray with Caliban Green Spray. Runs to $7.80 for that. You'll then need to do a Zenithal Highlighting with Sons of Horus Green. That'll cost you $7.80 for that tub. You'll then need to, of course, do another Zenithal Highlight with Eidolon Purple Clear. Runs you $7.80 with that using an airbrush. And then finally, for that Magenta Glow, you'll need to use Volupus Pink, which runs you $7.80 for that product as well. For all the materials that we paint up in silver, you need to buy a pot of Ironbreaker. And for all the parts that were done in gold, you'll need to buy a pot of Retributor Armor. Both those cost you $7.80 as well. Now for all the light gray that we use for the pale gray that we use for the energy shields as well as for the bases, you'll need to buy a pot of Ulthuan Gray, which runs you $4.55 for that product. And then of course for all the parts that we did the oil washing on the energy shields as well as the bases and the miniatures, you'll need to buy a can of Army Painter Strong Tone, which is $32 for that product as well. Now for all the parts that we did in green real quick, so for the ammo cans and the dry brushing on those ammo cans, you'll need to buy Vulcan Green as well as Sabarite Green, which runs you $4.55 for those. Now for the tubing that runs along the neck as well as the eyes and the energy weapons that we have, you'll need to use Militarum Green, which runs you $4.55 for that detail. Now for all the copper bits, you'll need to buy a can of Screaming Bell, which is $7.80 for that as well. And for all the pinks that we did for the energy shields with the base coating, the glazing, the highlighting, you'll need to buy a Pink Horror as well as Emperor's Children, and those cost you $4.55. Now for the neon effect that we did on the bases, you'll need to buy Fulgrim Pink for your pink colors, and Baharath Blue for all the blue effects that we did. Those were both running at $4.55 for those. And if you want to rim your bases in that like stormy gray color we use, you have to buy a pot of Rust Gray, runs at $4.55. And then of course, if you want to do that matte finish, you'll need to buy a can of Munitorium Varnish, runs at $19.50. Now, assuming that you bought everything on the Citadel and Army Painter method list for the very first time, you're talking about a grand total investment of $169.30 to paint up your gang with this synthwave inspired paint job. Now, when you compare that with the Cheapskate method of $40.73 and you subtract the two, you're talking about a grand total savings of $128.57. So there you have it, guys. This is how you guys can quickly as well as cheaply paint up some Van Saar gangers for your guys' Necromunda campaign with this kind of synthwave inspired paint job. That's going to do it for this one, you guys. As always, please feel free to like, comment, and or subscribe. Your guys' input is valuable to us as always. Also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, as well as blogger.com for all the latest, greatest hobby news related to our channel. That's going to do it for this one, you guys. I'll catch you guys next one. Peace out and stay classy.